Listen to the Vibes.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. And I'm very happy to welcome Tim Blist and Michael Laricchia. These guys have made a graphic novel. And from what I understand, y'all are with Dark Horse Comics now?
Yes, sir.
Sweet. Well, we're going to talk about that and get to know these guys. And the name of the book is Planet of Blue, Rise of a Goo.
Yes, sir. Planeta Blue, Rise of a Goo.
All right. Well, I got to read some of it.
Nice.
And I really enjoyed the fact that you kind of showed both sides of the topic that you had written about. But before we get into that discussion, Michael, we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. I'm out in Massachusetts. I'm a comic book artist, writer, a animator, graphic designer, somewhat of a musician. I wouldn't say a professional musician. I'm a dad. I try to keep myself busy all the time, but right now I work as a graphic designer full time. But in my past, I self-published a lot of comic books, and what really got me going with that was in 2005 I got the Xeric Grant Award, which was an award that was given out by Peter Laird, who was one of the Ninja Turtle founders.
Oh, yeah.
He set up a foundation to basically promote self-publishing. So back then, like internet stuff, like self-publishing wasn't as big then as it is now. So people just didn't have as much access to information. So they awarded this thing every year it went on for a while. And that's what sort of kicked me off into doing self-publishing and and since then, over the years, I've been doing my own books, and I've been doing tabletop game illustrations and all kinds of other freelance stuff. So just keeping my feet in the creative world as much as possible.
And so you got my dream job, because that's what I wanted to do. But, life happens, I guess. I took a different direction. Well, Tim, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I'm a hip hop artist and an author now. Also, like Mike, I'm a father, which I take a lot of pride in, because I feel like as long as you raise some kids who love themselves and are compassionate about other people, then you did a good job. So I take that job very serious. That's like my number one job. But I've been around making music for over 2 decades now, hip hop music, but conscious hip hop music. So more on the positive side, about upliftment and such. And I just been writing this book for the past few 5 years, and just really had a blast doing it. And now, I work with young people. That's another thing that I've always done, work with youth, really try to empower them and advocate for them. That's been my main kind of work, if you will, during the day. I always say, like, during the day I work with youth, advocating for them, and then at night I put on my cape and head to the stage and and drop rhymes and bars, as the kids like to call them these days. But yeah, man, I love life, love trying to make this world a better place, as best as I can. Leave it a little bit better before I go. So that's a little bit about myself.
So what I understand is that when you go talk at like schools and in front of children, that you do a little musical before you get started, right?
Oh yeah, totally, man. The kids, they love music, man, no matter what it is. To kind of show up with the music blaring and to show them, like, hey, this is what I do, and I do it well. At least I believe so. I've gotten paid a lot of money to do it throughout the years. Not as many as much as I'm sure of others, but I made a living off of it, and that's what I think is important. That's part of the message. Is like, if you have a passion, just go all out with it. I did graduate from UMass Amherst, but I took that knowledge and applied it to my day job, and at night, pursued the passion kind of deal. And so when we go out, now I'm bringing Mike on stage with him. He's my backup guy.
I'm the hype man.
He's the hype man. He's the hype man.
We'll see.
But it's always awesome, man, because you see these kids, because they don't really know me. I'm an underground hip hop artist. I think that's important to say, because I've always been independent by choice, because I wasn't really trying to do some of what in hip hop, a lot of times when people think about hip hop, they have an idea in their mind. But I came around during another time, so sometimes these kids are meeting me for the first time, and so I tell Mike all the time, it always takes about half the verse for them to go from like looking around like, should we like this guy, to like, yeah, and like getting into it. And it's always it's a good feeling, to still be able to do it, to connect with young people, and then to show them about literature, show them about this thing called comics and graphic novels, which Mike and I are very passionate about, and be able to put that then in their face, and to get them excited about it also.
I think it's cool too, especially when we talk to kids, is that they see how that creative spirit can cross over to different art forms. So he comes up as a performer, and then we're doing a visual art type thing. So kids who are like, well, I draw, and they feel like that's all I do, they kind of see that, you can actually translate this stuff into other mediums, and that's really a lot of fun to see the kids sort of, because obviously like music is such an immediate connection with people, right? It's like you get into it and you feel your body responds to it. So to start talking to people about something like reading, but get them ready in that way and prime them up for it, it's a really sort of a magical thing to witness. Because I love getting up there on that stage with them too. I mean, I am not a performer. I imagined I was, like, how you were saying you wanted to be in the arts when you were growing up. Like, I always wanted to be a singer, or like I always wanted to be like a soul singer. I'm gonna admit that on this podcast. And I don't have a voice or anything, but I was like, I could get up there and belt out some songs or something. But
I always wanted to be David Lee Roth when I grew up, but
yeah.
But then again, you have to be able to sing first.
David Lee Roth did a radio show, right? So you're kind of like on the same vibe there,
right?
Yeah.
One thing that I like about what y'all are talking about is, say, we'll take my show for instance. I could make a lot more money if I was to, start talking about politics or pop culture, controversial stuff, the Karen videos and all that. But there's enough of that going on. And there's not enough positivity stuff going on. And we do need to influence the next generation in a more positive way. Tell me how you do that in your book.
Yeah, I love that, man, because for me, that's what was important, as an artist, is to not do what's already being done out there. I mean, I think there's so much noise. There's so many people who are doing certain aspects really well too, right? So you see people and you're like, oh, that's cool. And I'm a spiritual person. So for me, I'm like, hey, that's me in another body, right? That's and I can root them on. Like, that's awesome that person is doing it. I don't got to do a song just like that. I don't have to do it just to be popular and just do what's what's popping, what's trending. For me, it's like, hey, what's not being said, what's not being done. And so, this book, Planeta Blue, Rise of Agu, started off as just a bedtime story. I would tell my kids, I have 4 kids. My youngest now is 5. And I just start telling them these stories of, a chicken that's talking, bok bok, and then he'd go off on these adventures or whatever. And then one day I started, as my kids got older, my older ones, my sons, it got a little bit more exciting. It got a little bit more action in it. and naturally, some of the things that I'm passionate about, animals and the planet and stuff, kind of seeped in. And what was cool was I wasn't doing a good job as a bedtime story because they stayed up, right? That was one thing. But I saw how excited they were about it. And I was excited too. As an artist, you can tell when like certain material gets you excited and how it's landing on the audience. And so, that nighttime kind of story turned into a daytime story where I was talking to them about it. Like, what do you guys think? Because I was like, I'd like there to have a council and, who should be on the council. And they were like, kind of giving me some of these ideas. And it was really cool to see how excited they were. And so when, I started developing the story, and it was really, magical for me. This is my first book. This is my debut book as an author, but I've always told stories, right, in the form of music. And, I've always been a storyteller, but it started developing where I was like, man, let me write this down, because I feel like I got something here. And what was awesome about it was, some of these things that I was passionate about, like I said, animals, kind of bubble to the top, and what we're doing to the environment and to the animals bubble to the top. And I was just like, man, this story, I feel like could be a positive message, could be, a tale of caution. It could also empower the young people, because the very first scene was just a scene out of my life. I had these young people that you see behind me over here. Some of them were based off of young men and women that I knew very well. Kids like Angel. And as many people know, angels ain't always angels, right? So he's the kid who's always, saying the wrong thing at the right time. So he's always cracking people up. And then there's this young woman, Laris, who I modeled after this young woman, Jaylee, who's very just like every other kid, bubbly, excited about life, talking, about boys or whatever's, exciting to them, but very capable. Whenever she showed up, whenever it was like, hey, can you represent this club or can you do something? She was always like front and center and able to really present. And so when I thought about Laris, which is our main character, being in front of this world stage trying to save humanity and being put on trial for the atrocities. That's what happened. Like the animals whisked these kids away, put them on trial for the atrocities that humankind have done to animal kind and to nature. Could she stand up there? Could it be believable that someone could stand up there with all this pressure and really rise to the occasion? And I was like, yeah, I know that Jaylee could do that, right? And so that felt very believable for me and ideally for the audience. And luckily, I've gotten a chance to get a lot of feedback since the book has been published and been out there. We put it out first as a Kickstarter, and the youth have really given us a lot of great feedback. The youth have really said like, hey, I love that this is in our language. When they're reading it, they can hear their voice, which, for me, I'm like, yeah, because you want it to be authentic. You want it to be something that lands with the audience, and they are the target audience. And so at the end of the day, I want them to be inspired, to feel like, hey, I'm empowered. If something, because we all face challenges, some bigger than others. And so when they face these challenges, to tap into their inner superhero, right? And to say like, I can conquer this no matter what. It may take a while, it may take years, but if I stick to it, I'll be able to win. And that's what I want these kids to know, that they can win.
Well, when it comes to Kickstarter, especially if nobody really knows the project, how do you get people interested?
Yeah, Mike, you want to answer
Well,
that?
I worked on a Kickstarter before we did this one, which was for a tabletop game that did really well. And what I learned from that was basically doing your best to get people to review it or to look at it, or if you know people who are sort of like influencers. I hate using that term, but people listen to basically. But for our job book, it was, Tim has a good network of people that he's built up through his music career, and I have a network from my art endeavors and stuff. So, it's a matter of sort of getting people primed that, hey, we're going to be putting on this fundraising effort, and slowly working them up to when you launch it. And then when you launch it, like really hitting it like it's a full-time job for about a month, and pushing it out to people, reminding people, getting the word out. And Tim had gotten people invested in the project before we launched it too, basically, look, this is gonna, they believed in his, him being able to follow through with it and all those kinds of things. And I think you also have to set like a realistic goal too of what you want to raise,
Yeah, I think the prep is so important. I think, before we got involved in it, and shout out to Mike for suggesting it. I had just seen it, and I just thought, people would just like one day, just say like, I'm going to do this, and you can't, right? That's not realistic. You really, first of all, on the platform, you have to, set it all up. And they help you through that process. But most importantly is us knowing that we needed to have certain assets, certain visuals that, every day we were going to, put out there in social media and really run a campaign. Know that like, hey, because you could put it up there for 3 months or whatever, 6 months or a week. But we knew like a month seemed realistic. The $10,000 mark was realistic. We, like, hey, it would be great if we go over. I had some people who, like Mike said, I was already had already invested in the project, meaning family and friends who believed in my vision and, were supporters of my music and such. And so even, certain people who I had already talked to before who were like, yeah, I'd like to invest. I was like, hey, hold off on that investment. Could you invest during, this Kickstarter time? So there was a lot of, foresight, a lot of planning that went into, and like anything, if you really, prepare and plan and work hard during it, it's achievable, you know what I mean? And so we, we just grinded it out, man, and then, we're really happy when we reached that mark and surpassed it a little bit, it was
And they
great.
run like courses on Kickstarter campaigns where they teach you how to do this stuff. I took like a free one years ago before we even met. And, they've got a whole formula of how to sort of, build audiences and things like that. So, it's out there. It's just people have made a living just teaching how to do that.
Yeah, and a pro tip I'll say for anyone who's thinking about doing it is look at other people who are, similar to what you're doing. We looked at other people who we hadn't heard of that put out, had put out a book, a graphic novel, similar thing, and we modeled it off of their campaign too. Like, oh, that seems to work. That lands with us. Like, for instance, you don't have to do a video, but we saw different people on there who did videos, and it was very compelling to hear from the author, from the artist, telling why they did it. And so that was like, oh yeah, we got to do that, so there were certain things that you're like, yeah, this is important to do, even if you have the choice to do it or not. Some things are important, you should do.
How do y'all balance your time between doing that and your other jobs and spending time with your family?
Oh man.
Well,
When
we did the book, it was unusual because that was right in the middle of the pandemic, so everybody was on lockdown.
Right.
So it's kind of a bizarre time because my kids were just running around while I was doing it, and with my stuff, it's like they can still be around, and I'm still kind of spending time with them while I'm working. But you just got to make the time. I think it's just like going to the gym, right? It's like you just have to say, this is the time I'm doing this, and anything that's extra, maybe I work a little bit more in that extra time or something, but
Yeah, you hit it, Mike. I think, really setting the time, like calendar, I live off of my phone, with the little, the little updates and such. And even things like that, like go to the gym, go, things that you don't have to, like, you got your 9 to 5 situation that, your boss is like, hey, do this, right? That you put on the calendar, but then the stuff that's important to us. And I really made it a point. I had read somewhere, like, if your kid, and like I said, my daughter's 5, if your kid asks you to play with them, make that time, So I tell her, like, hey, I don't have a lot of time, but I have 5 minutes, and I'll be like, I'm going to set this timer. And when the timer goes off, daddy got to go. Right. And so she understood that, but she knew that I was making that time. And that's important. We make the time for the things that's important in our lives. And even more important, like, some of these things really energize me and Mike, that the creative stuff, things that are important, energize me. I know I have a mom that's like, oh, you're going from this to that and the other. Don't you get tired? I was like, Ma, I love this stuff. I love doing this stuff. This stuff I'm passionate about. So I don't have a problem, jumping in my car and driving 2 hours because I'm going to do this presentation, the show or whatever, after doing whatever else. But it's, it's feeding me and ideally, keeping me young.
I heard that. Well, my grandson lives with us, and he's 3.
Mhm.
And I try every time he's like, Pawpaw, read me a book, or Pawpaw, let's play. And, this, I'm not getting any younger, but I still get down on the floor and we play the Hot Wheels and the monster trucks and all that.
Mhm.
It's really important because the time is not going to be there later. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And especially now, kids are a little less interactive with humans. It's like the more that they get that connection, the better off.
Yeah, I have adult kids, man, and having this, my 5-year-old now, I'm just cherishing every moment. And all of them were boys. This is my girl, so I get to have this little princess, and so I'm just cherishing it, man. I find myself in these moments where I'm like, man, this is heaven. This is heaven on earth. I'm going to appreciate it. I'm going to savor it as much, because we know they're growing, before you know it, she's off to middle school or college. And I'm like, so I'm like, every little second, I'm like making that time because it's so precious and so important.
Well, do you think making this book kind of keeps you young and more in touch with the kids?
Oh, totally, man. I love that she has on her own been like, Daddy, read me the story, right? And it's not for her, it's a YA book, right? Meaning that I would say anyone from like 7, 8, or 9, they could read it straight through. She's learning right now, so I'll read it to her. But there's like a scene, for instance, where the seal, as we know, there's hunters out there that are hunting seals, and there's a story that's really heart-wrenching. So on that scene, I edit it, right? I'm like, here's a 5-year-old. I'm like, oh, and he escaped. You know what I'm saying? I edited it a little bit. I softened it a little
Bambi's
bit.
mom made it.
Yeah, Bambi's mom.
Made it. She's
Perfect.
fine.
Yeah, yeah.
It'll be in the second movie.
But the fact that she was drawn, and this is a big testament to Mike's art, she was drawn to the colors, drawn to the characters. I believe she sees herself, in the main character, Laris, and that was important for me. It's like for all young people to see themselves, especially when I started writing this, I felt like there were certain stories that weren't getting told, and I was like, hey, I got a story to tell that no one has told before. Now she can see herself as a hero, right? And be like, yeah, I want to be like this person who, is flawed like all of us, but also striving to be the person that they want to be. And so I think that's an important message. And to see her gravitate towards it, to bring the book and be like, come on, Daddy, read this part. I'm like, yes, that makes me feel really good.
Well, you gonna do anything else besides this as far as graphic novels go?
Oh yeah. Yeah, this is a series, man. Even though the story kind of concludes, so it could be, it's kind of like one off kind of thing. We put the seeds there. We planted the seeds, if you will. And even, this Dark Horse version, we even had a trailer, because the plan after we wrote it was like this longer arc. And we actually had a retreat, writer's retreat, where I thought it was gonna be 3 books, but it's actually I thought it was gonna be 2 more books, but it actually gonna be 3 books. And so there's a longer arc. We're gonna develop more of these characters, give some of these guys more stage time, if you will. And I'm excited about where it's gonna go, because even though some of it, and I'm really connected to it, I find myself sometimes even getting choked up knowing like where it's going. When I'm writing, I'm like, oh man, because the story is really telling itself. I believe it's like any other art. If you tap in and plug in, it's almost like channeling. I feel like I just close my eyes and I'm like, what does the story want to tell me? And I'm just like, and then I just write it. My process is using a pen, and it just kind of tells itself. And so to see where the story wants to go, and obviously I'm guiding it, I'm adding my flavor into it, but it's going in a certain way. And not to spoil anything, but I think it's important to say that it's not a tragedy, right? At the end of the day, you're not going to be like haunted by it and be like, oh man, feeling down about it. It's really meant to be empowering. However, there are sacrifices. There are moments where you might shed a tear or such, or feel like, oh man, this is, I'm sorry to hear, that this happened. And but at the end, we gonna make it. We got to make it.
Do you guys have a website?
Yeah, totally. PlanetaBlue.com. And so Planeta, as you see, is planet with an A, and then blue without the E, and .com. And you'll find, links to a bunch of stuff, extra information, story, why we did it, and how, it goes even deeper, and also links to how you can, purchase the book, and a bunch of swag. Like this is actually, a shirt of Morning Water, one of the characters with the Wu-Tang sign over there, so we had a lot of fun doing this, and we hope that you all will too, as you read and dive into it.
It's nothing more cool than seeing your stuff on merchandise, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And people wanting to wear it. Yeah.
Exactly.
The other part of it.
And what about your social media?
Yeah. So everything. Sorry, Mike. I let me let Mike say this, because I've been jabbering on over here.
Well, there's a Planeta Blue book is our Instagram one, and that has like more of the up-to-date stuff. Both Tim and I have our own Instagram accounts too. which are just our names. It's
like
Tim Bless
Lauricia and Tim Bless.
Mike,
Instagram, Facebook. We don't really get on like X or what do you call it?
TikTok.
Formerly known as Twitter. We're not really on there, but yeah, Instagram is mainly in Facebook because where we update a lot of the social media stuff, and SoundCloud too. So we got some music there, and I'd be remiss to say that I'm working on an audiobook too. In a lot of the young people who I kind of wrote off of them. So, for instance, Jaylee is doing the voice of Laris, which is really fun to hear her voice really come to life. And it's going to be one of those where, like I said, I'm not reading it. They're acting it out, and there's going to be some music in the background, sound effects. So we're going all out with the audiobook.
Just go ahead and make the cartoon, man.
Yeah,
Yes, that's the next one. That's after that. That's what we're gunning for. The cartoon and even a movie, man. Sky's the limits with this. We're pushing. We got this huge dream, and we're hoping that it manifests. And it's cool to see some folks who just pick up the book. And this was the Kickstarter version. There's a Dark Horse version. It's a little different, but people open it and they look at it and they're like, "Hey, this should be a movie." I'm like, "Yes, you got it." So thanks for that.
Guys, thank you so much for coming on the show and spending your time with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun. Thank you.
And I also want to thank all you folks out there. If you are new to the channel, I hope you'll come back. Hit that subscribe button from our regulars. You guys are awesome because you make it possible for me to do this. And until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, and on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network